Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. For today's video, we're going to be watching the spanking that Trudeau got in the House of Commons today as he continuously dug himself deeper and deeper into a ditch every time he opened up his mouth. And this is because on Wednesdays, he needs to stay in the House of Commons for questions from all the different parties, and every time Pierre set him up for the question, Trudeau failed in great fashion, and this is how it started.
Speaker, the Prime Minister has had a revelation. In an interview with the Halifax Chronicle Herald, he told how he responded to people asking for him to spend even more government money. And he said, and I quote, "As soon as you do that, inflation goes up by exactly the same amount." Oh, right? Right. Why didn't I think of that? My goodness. Spending money you don't have actually causes inflation. In the middle of having epiphanies, has he also realized that budgets don't balance themselves?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservative Party has been using that approach about concerns on inflation to stand against things like national food programs for kids or dental care for seniors. They have stood and objected against and even campaigned against dental care for seniors over the past many months. But we've delivered to over 100,000 seniors of the 2 million who've already registered for dental care the support that they hadn't gotten in years or even decades. But he stands against it with some made-up excuse around inflation when delivering services delivers for Canadians.
Like, you can't make this up. Pierre literally just quoted something that Trudeau said, and now Trudeau's trying to say that Pierre is making up some excuse of inflation, as if inflation isn't a real thing. And again, this is the setup that Pierre wanted.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
He calls his own words a made-up excuse, Mr. Speaker. You can't make this stuff up. He said that when people ask him, can you send us more benefits or send us an extra $1,000 a month? Well, he responds, as soon as you do that, inflation goes up by exactly the same amount. Right?
Right. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, that is exactly why over the past years we've been focused on bringing down inflation by supporting Canadians, and it is working. For the past 4 months, Mr. Speaker, inflation has been down in the Bank of Canada target range, while we continue to increase supports for Canadians, increase dental care for Canadians with Conservatives that campaigned against, supports for seniors, supports for young people, increased investments in childcare, bringing childcare fees down to $10 a day. These are the investments we're making that do not add to inflation, but add to Canadians' well-beings as they're making ends meet. That's what we stand for, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, he finally, for once, thought about monetary policy. He said, as soon as you spend more, inflation goes up by exactly the same amount. Right. And he is right for once. But repeating the same costly promises that he has already broken does not change that fundamental monetary rule. So will the Prime Minister acknowledge that, yes, the economy is about numbers, that people pay their rent in numbers, their gas in numbers, their groceries in numbers, and that the numbers are too high?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Fundamental difference in perspective between the Conservatives and this Liberal government. The macroeconomic situation of Canada is one of the best in the G7, one of the best in the world. And the independent credit rating agencies continue to give us AAA scores. The federal government is doing well, but Canadians need support. So we are choosing to deliver supports to Canadians with this solid fiscal position. Dental care, a national food policy, national disability benefits, help for housing and investments in the kind of supports for Canadians that he has stood against every step of the way, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
When I was housing minister, we built almost 200,000 houses and apartments, with the average rent being $973 for a one-bedroom apartment. But this Prime Minister is not worth the cost of housing, which has doubled 9 years after he and the NDP took power. What is he doing about it? He's giving $500 million to the mayor of Toronto, who has just jacked up home building taxes by 20%. Why does he reward local government gatekeepers that block the homes that Canadians need?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we are leading on the efforts to solve this housing crisis with a plan that is ambitious and concrete. Meanwhile, after having his housing bill panned by experts as being, quote, exceptionally weak response to the housing crisis riddled with loopholes, the Conservative leader chose to repeatedly delay debate in this House since October on his bill. That's because he just doesn't care. When he was minister, he lost 800,000 affordable apartments and only built 6 affordable homes.
Now, this is going to be a constant talking point for Trudeau going forward about when Pierre was housing minister. And it doesn't make much sense because when Pierre was housing minister, there wasn't a million migrants or 1.5 million migrants or immigrants that were coming into the country. Land, if you wanted to purchase a piece of land, was at a fraction of the price that it is now. There wasn't as much red tape in terms of building properties, if that's what you wanted to do. And your money, even as young Canadians, your money went further so that you could use it with purchasing power to buy a house. So there was very little that the government actually needed to do when it was involved in building houses. And not only does he not understand this, he seems to think that the federal government has no real connection with housing for some reason.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Actually, the number is closer to 200,000, but the Prime Minister has never been very good with numbers, right? So the Prime Minister cites the government-funded bureaucrats and liberal academics to bolster his approach, which has doubled housing costs in just 9 years, partly because he gives money to municipalities and politicians like Winnipeg, where they just blocked 2,000 homes right next to a government-funded transit station built for those homes. Why won't he accept my common sense plan to give bonuses to those municipalities that permit more building and penalties to those that stand in the way?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we criticize rightly the Leader of the Opposition, who, when he was housing minister, only built 6 affordable homes for Canadians across the country. But it is understandable, Mr. Speaker, because he was part of a government that took the federal government out of the building of affordable housing. They chose that the federal government had nothing to do with housing across the country. That's why for 10 years of non-involvement of the federal government, that leaves echoes. We've stepped up and invested in communities, invested in partnerships. We're getting the homes built. We're delivering for Canadians.
So now we got this clown here trying to claim that Pierre and the Harper government say that the federal government doesn't belong in housing and that they were the ones that pulled out, when he just, I think it was 9-10 months ago, came out and said this.
I'll be blunt as well. Housing isn't a primary federal responsibility. It's not something that we have direct carriage of.
So he clearly also thinks that the federal government, if that's what he's claiming Pierre thinks, he also thinks this. But, you know, Pierre actually understands it, and he clapped back at that saying this.
That's funny, because 8 years ago, he promised he was going to lower housing costs. It's also funny that the biggest housing agency in Canada, CMHC, is federal. Mortgage insurance, federal. Taxes, fiscal and monetary policy, federal.
So I don't know how Trudeau can continuously say that the housing isn't a federal problem, or that the Conservatives didn't think it was a federal problem, when clearly they know that the federal government is involved in housing. Pierre has just been talking about the bureaucracy of everything and getting that out so that more housing can be built. But after Trudeau goes through this delusional rant, even though we can go back in history and see what he actually has said before, Pierre decides to question him on the 4 million houses that he promised to be built by 2031, and this is how that went.
Not a chance. That's what the president of the Residential Construction Council said when asked if this prime minister would keep his promise to build 3.9 million homes by 2031. So let's hear it from the prime minister. To reach that target, he'd have to build 550,000 homes per year. So yes or no, will the prime minister hit the target of 550,000 homes this year? Yes or no?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, Canada is facing a housing crisis, and we need to take real action towards it, which is what we've done with the most ambitious and achievable plan that this country's ever seen. But, Mr. Speaker, that's not to say we haven't had housing crises before, and it's not to say we haven't solved housing crises before. At the end of World War II, there was a need for massive new housing, and Canada stepped up and got that housing built. Indeed, when the boomers came of age, there was a need for massive housing, and we made investments, and the federal government helped build housing across the country for boomers. We are doing that now as we build housing.
I honestly don't understand what these guys' obsession is with talking about things way, way in the past. I mean, it's enough that they always talk about 10 years ago, but now Trudeau's bringing up World War II, 1940s. That's his example. And he's not the only one. We see that with the NDP just a while ago with the capital gains tax. Don Davies talking about how, oh, it's not as bad as the 1980s when the Conservatives were in power.
So interestingly about the capital gains tax, the inclusion rate under Brian Mulroney, the Conservatives, was 75%. It dropped to 50%, and this budget puts it to 67%. So it's not even as high as it was under the Conservatives in the 1980s.
I just don't understand why these guys are so stuck in the past. But this is where things start to get a little crazy in the House when Trudeau talks about a catalog that's coming out.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
That was a wonderful history lesson, except it didn't answer the question. He promised he'd lower housing costs in 2015. He doubled them. He promised he'd double home building. It actually went down and is still dropping. But now he's promising 3.9 million brand new homes by 2031. That means he'd have to build 550,000 this year and every year. So once again, will the Prime Minister keep his promise to build 550,000 homes this year? Yes or no?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader Opposite speaks of 2015. Well, we took office with a commitment to get this government back, the federal government back in the business of building housing. We launched a national housing strategy in 2017 that put 2.5 million Canadians into new or refurbished homes, and we've continued to invest ever since. We're building homes on public lands. We're converting underused federal offices into homes. We're taxing vacant lands to incentivize construction. We're building apartments, bringing rents down with top-ups to the apartment construction loan program. We're scaling up modular housing. We're launching Canada Builds to lead a Team Canada effort to build more homes and more, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
The question was not how quickly he could read off talking points written for him by his staff. The question was whether he's going to break yet another housing promise. Remember, he promised he'd lower housing costs, he doubled them. He promised he'd double the number of homes built, they went down. Now he's promising 3.9 million new homes by 2031. That means 550,000 new homes this and every year. Will he keep that promise? Yes or no?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition's criticism is there's too many measures in our housing plan. Housing should be solved by a simple one-size-fits-all solution, according to the Leader of the Opposition. That's perhaps how he managed to build only 6 affordable homes when he was Minister of Housing. Because yes, we have a broad range of initiatives that are delivering on housing, like topping up the Housing Accelerator Fund with $400 million. million, a new $6 billion Canada Housing Infrastructure Fund to help communities build. We're leveraging transit funding to build more homes. We're launching a housing design catalog. We're incentivizing more skilled trade workers.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
He's announcing a catalog, everybody. Hey, right on. Give him a round of applause. Come on, give him a round of applause. You can't afford a home. You might end up in a tent. Your rent is doubled. But hey, you've got a brand new catalog. Mr. Speaker, the question was, will he build 550,000 new homes, yes or no?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
He mentioned the history lesson. Well, if he was housing minister, he should have known that the way we solved the housing crisis after World War II was by putting forward a catalog of homes that builders could access to build extremely rapidly right across the country. So yes, that's one of the measures we're bringing back. And his mockery of concrete initiatives that are going to deliver for Canadians is exactly what's wrong with his approach. He'd rather mock and insult than actually roll up his sleeves and get solutions built for Canadians.
Now that's a real rich statement coming from this trust fund baby who's probably never rolled up his sleeves to do any kind of hard labor. But they're talking about these modular homes that they want to introduce, and now he's talking about a design catalog. And as you could hear all the conservatives yelling, Sears, Sears, because this isn't a new idea. This was back in the 1900s up to the 1940s, where they had modular homes that you could buy from the Sears catalog, and they would come set them up for you. And yeah, these were cheaper homes. A lot of them are, I think, still standing today, but after the 1940s, these kind of stopped. And the fact that he's saying that we're bringing out this home design catalog, they're just literally rinse and repeating, reusing old ideas, yet he wants to congratulate himself and pat himself on the back for this. Now, who knows what else is going to be in this catalog? I'm sure we will have a field day once this catalog does come out. But as always, I'd love to hear from you guys. So let me know in the comment section below what you thought about this whole situation. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And as always, I will catch you guys on the next one. Thanks so much.